Hey everyone, this is Alan Schimmel and welcome to TechStrong TV for Tuesday, September 7th. Welcome to our show. Shout out a happy birthday to my brother Brent up in New York. Happy birthday. It's September 7th. It's after Labor Day. Welcome to the new normal. We have a good show lined up today. Let me jump right in and give you a little bit of what we've got in store. First of all, our first guest today is Rui Mendes. I called it Rui Mendes, but Rui is Portuguese, slightly different pronunciation, and I mangled it. But more importantly, Rui works with a company called OutSystems, who is a low-code, no-code platform provider. And, you know, here at Media Ops, one of the nice things about sitting where we sit is I see themes come across, our landscape. And what we've seen certainly in the last maybe 2 months is more and more information on low code, no code. It's really achieving a critical mass. I think there's a lot of reasons for it. It's the rise of the citizen developer, rapid application deployment, and during COVID where we needed to get apps out for specific functionality quickly. Shortage of developers, and low code, no code allowing you to expand your developer base quickly. But whatever the reasons, low code, no code is here and it's here to stay, and it's getting better and bigger every day. As a matter of fact, I'm going to let you all in on a little secret. November 19th here at Media Ops, we're going to be doing a low code, no code virtual event. And I don't even know the name of it yet, but the team's working on it. But stay tuned for it. It's November 19th. We're already looking for speakers. So if you are in the low-code, no-code space, or you are a developer or a low-code, no-code developer, and you have a story to tell, reach out to me. We'd love to hear it. We'd love to feature it in our event on November 19th. But for today, we're just going to meet with Rui Mendes at OutSystems. After that, we're going to go way back in the archives. We're going to go back to last year in our Kubernetes virtual summit that we did last year. And it's a conversation I had with none other than Tim Hockin, one of the founding members of the engineering team at Google on Kubernetes. And Tim, of course, is still at Google, and his talk last year was on the future of Kubernetes. It'll be interesting to see now, fast forward a year later, how much of what Tim spoke about last year has come to pass and how much has not come to pass. The reason I put it up, though, is also October 1st, we're going to be having another Kubernetes, our second annual Kubernetes virtual event. And I'm here to tell you that Tim Hockin has agreed to appear again as a keynote. I will be interviewing him for it, and really looking forward to having Tim keynote this year's Kubernetes event. So we have that for you. Also going into the archives a little bit, I pulled out of our TechStrong Con just 3 months ago. Jane Grohl, my partner over at DevOps Institute, CEO, on her upskilling for 2020 presentation that she did based upon last year's upskilling report which the DevOps Institute does every year. And it's a great presentation by Jane. But one of the reasons I put it on today is that the DevOps Institute is also right now conducting this year's survey for next year's report on upskilling. Actually, the report will be out before the end of the year, around December. But the survey is open right now, and we need you to, if you can, take a moment, take that report, go over to DevOpsInstitute.com, and the link will be there. So this is based on last year's report, but help us out with this year's report if you can. And then after Jane is done, I'll be back. We'll do some of the news around the Media Ops sites. Then after that, we're going to head over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor. Charlene has Lynn Klassen, VP of Public Cloud Product at Encino, I believe it is, as well as a webinar preview for the great webinars we have this week coming up at Media Ops. And then it's over to Mitch at the Analyst Corner, where Mitchell will have some great commentary and video. And then I'll be back to wrap things up. It's a great Tuesday on September 7th here for TechStrong TV. We're going to take a break right now, and I'll be right back with Rui Mendes of OutSystems.
Join topic experts and peers for a Splunk virtual event. Observability to enable your digital initiatives. Are your apps and services distributed in the cloud, getting refactored as microservices, or becoming more complex? If they are, you must factor in observability. Observability is all your data to help you find unexpected failure conditions, explain why they happen, and resolve them fast. This event is about the challenges, opportunities, and best practices to successfully build observability into everything you develop, deliver, or monitor. Register today.
As I said at the top of the show, low-code, no-code has become a real hot topic over the last 30 to 60 days. I'm sure there are some reasons around COVID for it. There's also the rise of the citizen developer, which has been going on from before COVID, shortage of developers, BPA, RPA, other reasons. All of them together have resulted in a crescendo of low-code, no-code solutions, platforms, interest in the market. OutSystems is one of the companies providing solution here. And this is my conversation with Rui Mendes from OutSystems about low-code, no-code.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on another episode of TechStrong TV. For this episode, I'm joined by Rui Mendes, who is a DevOps expert in the professional services team at OutSystems. And I mangled his name. Rui is actually Portuguese by descent. And I have a tough time sometimes with the Portuguese names. Rui, why don't you say it right for our audience so we give it respect it deserves.
The right pronunciation would be Rui Mendes.
Okay,
like
we're going to go with it. I got it. We'll go with Rui and hopefully
just
accept my apologies in advance.
No problem at all.
I do the best I can. So, Rui, I don't know if we've ever had anyone from OutSystems on TechStrong TV since we started here about 4 or 5 months ago with this. Why don't we first give our audience a little bit of background about OutSystems?
Sure. So OutSystems is a low-code platform. And what this platform does, or low-code platforms as a whole, that they use a full-stack visual programming model for developing applications. And this approach greatly accelerates your ability to develop applications, whether we are talking about simple productivity apps like the ones you use for inside a department, or even large, complex, enterprise-grade systems that you can either use for employee or customer-facing scenarios. Now, because of this latter type of applications that I mentioned, low-code platforms also provide powerful integration capabilities for leveraging data or services from other enterprise systems that you might have. And they also give you the possibility of extending your applications with custom code if needed, a bit in contrast with this other category of tools that you can also find, which are the no-code platforms. So I would say this could be a brief overview of low-code and low-code platform like OutSystems.
Excellent. Now, and you know what, we introduce you as a sort of a DevOps expert on the professional services team. You know, not that we think you're lying, you know, but give our audience a little bit of your background on how you come to, you know, be a DevOps expert and what you do as part of the professional services team there.
Okay. So I've been with OutSystems for the past 8 years. Currently, I'm part of the DevOps experts team, as you mentioned, in the professional services group, where our mission is precisely to evolve the DevOps practice on top of the OutSystems platform, and also train and explain to our customers how can they adopt a DevOps approach on top of the platform. that's the main goal of this team. And before that, I was part of the architecture experts that focused in defining architecture best practices for OutSystems applications. I also delivered projects and also had a couple of years as a factory manager as one of our major OutSystems factories in one of our customers.
Excellent. Now, Rui, since the whole COVID thing, we've heard more and more about low code, no code type of platforms. Not that they weren't around before this; they were around before this, and they were very successful. Whether we're talking about RPA integrations and business process BPA, they were around and they've been successful. But with COVID, the rapid deployment aspect of it, right? Able to rapidly design, develop an application and get it out has really made them more valuable. And then secondly, with everyone working remote and with so much applications that needed to be developed to support remote workers or to support e-commerce or to support things that were happening as a result of COVID, we've taxed the ability of just pure developers to develop these applications. And so when we use tools like low code, no code, right, we can broaden the base of people who can help us develop applications, right? Citizen developers, if you want to call them, or something like that, right? Instead of professionals. And that kind of fits in with a DevOps sort of mentality as well. So, or maybe it doesn't. Let me throw that out at you. How does low code help organizations embrace DevOps?
Yeah, indeed. I think low code puts organizations in a better position to adopt a DevOps approach in their software delivery process. And let me start to explain that first by telling that, well, low-code platforms, and especially OutSystems, which is the one that I know best, this is not just another glorified code generation tool that simply intervenes in the first stage of the delivery process to give you a head start. Low-code platforms such as OutSystems, they also include built-in capabilities that allow you to manage the full life cycle of the applications that you build with the platform. And I can give you a couple of examples from my OutSystems knowledge. For instance, you have an embedded build and deployment server in the platform that automates all of the compilation, deploying, and distribution of applications to the servers where they run. You have also immediate feedback every time that you push a new module version regarding the impact that new version has in other modules in terms of breaking changes, the ones that depend on that module. For the quality assurance dimension, you are also able to write functional tests using the same language that you use to develop the applications, or you can leverage a tool that we have called Architecture Dashboard that validates the quality of the applications that you build and the adherence to development and architecture best practices so that you can have your technical debt under control. You can create cross-environment deployment plans that automate the deployments across your delivery pipeline all the way from development to production. And also you have the applications that are built with OutSystems. They are fully instrumented for monitoring purposes, which means that the platform automatically logs any errors or application usage data or performance metrics. So all of these capabilities combined that are put forward by low-code platforms such as OutSystems, they can help organizations tackle the challenges and reduce the complexity of adopting a DevOps approach in their software delivery process. And this can happen in a number of ways. So firstly, these platforms automate several tasks in the software lifecycle. from generating the application's artifacts to staging new application versions all the way into production. And this helps you increase the flow that you deliver new changes to your applications from development to production. Also, the platform, the local platforms increase the feedback loops, which is this very fundamental concept in DevOps when you are promoting a new change across your delivery pipeline. And this happens during the coding stage, during the quality assurance, the staging, and even in the runtime operations. Also, the local platforms increase the close collaboration or improve the collaboration between different profiles or roles in the organization that work using a common platform. For instance, when you are creating deployment plans, a development team can create a deployment plan that is then reviewed and triggered by an operations team. And finally, just to finalize my case, local platforms build applications that are built for change. And this means that the platform itself assists you when you need to change the application to conform with the changing of the requirements. And this, I would say, promotes experimentability or promotes, let's say, experimentation during your development process, allows you to have a more iterative development process, which in turn is going to drive innovation in the way that organizations deliver their software to their end users.
Excellent. Good stuff. So, Rui, I've been in technology a long time. One of the things that I always kind of factored in is the green field versus the brown field, right? So if I came to you today and said, Rui, we have not done any development, we have no applications we've developed, we're starting from scratch, and we want to use the OutSystem platform. We want to be a very DevOps-enabled kind of organization. Set it up with us, right? Boy, you'd rub your hands and say, this is easy, right? It's probably the easiest implementation we ever do. Unfortunately, we never get those, right? It's always, we've been developing for 20 years. We've got a whole bunch of applications. We got to modernize some of them. Some of them are on a mainframe and we can't move them to the cloud. Or, some are, tied to legacy systems that can't be updated. But we want to nevertheless do DevOps, and we want to use low code where we can, right? And these are some of the DevOps tools we're using, and we don't want to get rid of them either, right? So that's the mission, if you accept it. Mission impossible. How do you make that mission possible?
Well, first of all, I wanted to say that low-code platforms, they are not closed, so they are not restricted or force you to work only inside the platform and with the tools that the platform provides. On the contrary, low-code platforms, and especially OutSystems, which I know very well, they have great integration capabilities, and you can indeed integrate the platform with other DevOps tools in the ecosystems to go beyond the DevOps capabilities that are offered by the platform out of the box. And let me give you just a couple of quick examples that I collected from the field and are very common in our customers. For instance, setting up a CI/CD pipeline. So it's very common to have customers that request the need to integrate the OutSystems platform with a tool like Jenkins or Azure DevOps to plug the OutSystems platform into their delivery process. And that's quite straightforward. By leveraging the APIs that the platform exposes, specifically the deployment API, you can create an automated deployment pipeline for an OutSystems application end-to-end by integrating with some of these tools. Another example, UI test automation, which is also a very prevalent tool during the software development life cycle. So applications that are built with the OutSystems platform, they use standard coding frameworks like React.js, .NET, and this means that pretty much any tool that it's available on the market to test web or mobile applications can be used to test OutSystems applications. And integrating these tools with the platform greatly complements the functional testing capabilities that are already provided in the OutSystems ecosystem. And a final example, integration with an elastic stack, for instance. We have cases of customers that want to extract the application and platform logs that are generated by the platform and send them to an external location, like an elastic instance. And this is not only feasible, but we also provide accelerators and documentation for customers that want to put this integration in place, which in turn empowers their development teams to build their own dashboards for monitoring purposes, or create alarms, set up alarms based on monitoring data, or even correlate the monitoring data from the OutSystems platform with other sources to support their troubleshooting process. So there's a lot of room to, let's say, boost or potentiate the capabilities of the built-in capabilities of local platforms by integrating them with other tools in the DevOps landscape.
Excellent, excellent. Rui, we're almost out of time. It goes so quick, I apologize. But let's talk specifically now about OutSystems. When it's a platform, is it a SaaS-based platform? Is it installed locally? You know, how does that work?
Yeah, actually, you have both options. You can use the platform as a service that we provide in our public cloud, or if you want to and need to, you can also have an on-premises installation of the platform, whether in your local data center or in your private cloud, if that's the case. So both options are possible, and there are no much differences between the two deployment options for the platform.
Excellent. One other question. What about, here at where I sit at DevOps.com, I think the whole world is doing DevOps, right? But the whole world isn't doing DevOps. Yeah. What about customers who are, unfortunately, what about customers who aren't doing DevOps? Can they still use OutSystems?
Yeah, OutSystems does not force you to develop in a certain way. It does not force you to use an agile approach. Does not force you to automate your deployment pipeline. OutSystems is a low-code development platform that manages the full life cycle of the applications, but the way that you build the applications and you manage the delivery, it's all up to you. So the platform is not forcing you to work on a specific way. Although I should also say that if you are more prone towards an agile approach, or you adopt or you have DevOps principles in the way that you deliver software, you can extract a lot more from the platform if you work using those principles. Agreed.
All right. Rui, thank you so much for joining us on TechStrong TV today. Oh, you know what? What about people want more information? Where can they go?
Well, first and foremost, we have our corporate website, so outsystems.com. I would say this is the landing page for everything related with OutSystems, whether we're talking about success stories from our customers across multiple industries, or if you want to know more about let's say, technical knowledge, we have our success knowledge base where you can find a lot of information about development best practices, platform capabilities. You also can find our community forums where all of the OutSystems community, whether it's customers, partners, OutSystems employees, they all gather to exchange information. We have the Forge, which is our public repository of open source components. So a lot of possible sources that you can check it out, but start by going to the beginning, which is outsystems.com.
Excellent. Rui, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Good stuff.
It was a pleasure.
All right. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with our next guest. October 1st, we're going to be doing our second annual Kubernetes virtual event. For last year, Tim Hawken, one of the original Google engineering team members on Kubernetes, was nice enough to allow us to go over to the Google Cloud GCP headquarters and film an interview with him as a keynote. That's what I'm going to be playing for you just here in a moment. Last year's Kubernetes Virtual Summit keynote. The reason I'm doing is because in about a month, less than a month, 3 weeks, we will have this year's Kubernetes virtual keynote. And again, we are going to feature Tim Hawken as a keynote. I will be interviewing him. However, it won't be in person, obviously. But Tim will have great stuff to say. I'm looking forward to it. So now let's go back. Let's wind the clock back a year to Tim Hawken on the future of Kubernetes. All right, so Tim, first of all, thanks for being one of our keynotes on this Kubernetes Ecosystem Summit. I wanted to discuss a couple of things with you today, and I guess chronologically, let's go back to the beginning. Many people know that you were, part of the original, not the original Google engineering team, but part of the Kubernetes team. But I don't know if everyone knows it, and I don't know if really they understood what your role was. And can you give us a little bit about what your place was on that team, and kind of what was the goal there? What were you guys trying to do when this Kubernetes project first kind of took off?
So when we started all this, there was a big reorg that happened internally, and they took our cloud team and our technical infrastructure team, TI, smushed them together. And through the power of fusion, we became one team, and sort of instantaneously our goals aligned, which of course is not really what happened. But right. We had a bunch of meetings. The mission was figure out how to stop stepping on each other, how to stop duplicating each other's work, how to build a single system that serves both purposes. And so we had a series of meetings that we presented ideas at and discussed, and it was engineers from Seattle, Joe and Brendan, and engineers from down here, myself and Brian and others. And we started ideating on a bunch of just random thoughts. Right? Maybe it was Borg as a service, maybe it was something container-based, and Joe and Brendan saw what was happening with Docker, and they started to whip up this prototype. And my role at the time, I was actually working on our internal team on the node agent for Omega and Borg, which was Omelette and Borglet. When the team started to come together around Kubernetes or around containers, my first job was to figure out the node side of things. Right? What are the agents that are going to be running on the machine? What do they do? What do they do in terms of lifecycle management, in terms of storage management and networking? So the earliest versions of Kubelet, after it came out of sort of prototype stage, was where I spent most of my time.
Absolutely. And as the sort of team coalesced and the idea of doing something around containers and, was it called even Kubernetes at that point, or K8, or was
No, the name Kubernetes came pretty late in the game. At the time, the prototype was called 7, and so people were hacking on 7, and that was really it.
It's funny that was 7 and now it's sort of K8, but this was, at this point, was there any thought of like creating an open source project that would live and exist outside of Google, or?
Absolutely. Open source was definitely part of the strategy. Once we decided that we weren't going to be shooting for an as-a-service sort of thing, it obviously had to be open source. That was the only way we were going to get traction and get buy-in from the broader community. So open source was it. From the beginning, we knew we wanted to go big with open source in a way that not a lot of projects really do, which was really to drive ownership, to get people out in the world to feel like this was their project. And I'd say that was very successful, very strategically valuable to the project, to the success of it overall. I don't think it would be where it is if we hadn't gone big on that.
No, but it's a little bit of a chicken and egg issue too, I think, Tim, because one of the things I've kind of observed from attending Cloud Native Con, KubeCons, and these kinds of things is that really a lot of what's driving the underlying energy behind these things is open source, right? The Cloud Native and Cube movement, if you will, or the foundation behind it, right, has given the open source community a place to coalesce around, something to gather and hold up there. We had Linux before this, obviously, but this is really taking that open source community and giving it a home and a voice and power like it's never had, frankly. And I can't imagine that you guys back then would think, my goodness, look what it's become.
That's true. It is definitely sort of beyond wildest expectations. You're right. Linux existed. Open source existed for a long time, right? I mean, I cut my teeth on open source in the 90s, working on Linux and early versions of Red Hat and those sorts of things. And so I grew up sort of with that ethos of like, you're just going to write code and people are going to benefit from it. And that's this is the way you do things, right? Long before I ever did commercial software, I was doing open source. And then, I sort of came to Google and I took a very different track through Google. I worked on some, internal stuff that wouldn't make sense externally, and I lost track of open source. And when I came back to Kubernetes, the world is totally different. The open source world is a very different animal than it was in the 90s, right? And there was still, open source was still there, but what we tried to do with Kubernetes was a community that was very intentional, that was very broad and deep on purpose and not sort of by accident. And I mean no disrespect at all to the Linux community. The Linux community grew from nothing to what it is now over 20 years, right? We didn't want to wait 20 years.
Probably longer even, yeah.
Yeah, right. So we didn't want 20 years for Kubernetes to try to take off. We were trying to do something big and now and immediate. And the Linux community is sort of the result of the engineering that went into it. We wanted to start with a community first point of view where we said the community is a big part of what makes the project successful. And that was really key to Kubernetes.
Sure. Just another quick question or two on that, and then we'll kind of fast forward to today. You mentioned that, the team had sort of seen what Simon and the Docker guys were doing. And of course, Docker's not the first container. We've had Google's used Linux containers for years, and the world has used Linux containers for years. But it showed people, I think, what can be done here. Everyone started instantly, because so much in tech, it's not revolutionary, it's evolutionary. And I know you see something and you say, my goodness, why didn't I think of that, right? It was so elementary. And I think that's what happened with Docker. People saw immediately the potential of it. But yet there was also immediately a notion that we need something to orchestrate this. We need something to pull these containers together. And at the time, you know, there were a lot of wannabe contenders out there in the world. Kubernetes has obviously won this race or war or whatever you want to call it. It wasn't a war. It was actually fairly cooperative. But what do you attest that to? You know, because I mean, even in internet time, this has happened in the beat of a Thanos snap or whatever. You know, it's happened really quick.
Yeah. It's funny you say everybody thought that we would need this orchestration stuff. Actually, I think there was a lot of contention at the beginning of whether we would need that or not. Docker took tools that existed, right? They didn't really invent containers.
No.
In the sense the kernel technology existed. They were gluing together a dozen different bits of technology. What they nailed was a UX, a mindset, a workflow that resonated for people really deeply. Around the same time, we were open sourcing some internal tools. Our container stack from Google internal, we called it "Let me contain that for you," and we were open sourcing it. We hadn't quite open sourced it at the time that Docker landed. We open sourced it later in 2013, and it's the same tools, same technologies under the covers, wildly different UX, right? Like the way it approaches application development is totally different. And I think it works well for a place like Google where we control the development experience. It doesn't work so well out in the wild. And I can see that now. And it's exactly like you said, when Docker came out with your UX, and first I thought, well, this is ridiculous. Who would work this way? And then I started using it, and I realized, actually, this is really slick, right? And of course, as soon as I saw that, I played it in the context of what I already knew about Borg. I looked at Docker, and I went, well, it's like Borglet, but like prehistoric, right? But it'll get there. But you can't have Borglet without Borg. Right. And it was immediately obvious to us, those of us who'd used Borg internally, that we needed something bigger to manage all these machines. This idea of just using a single machine and using containers as a better deployment vehicle wasn't enough, right? So I think that's the bit that we added to the conversation. Docker, as on the track that it was on its way towards Swarm, which was an interesting approach to it, but we looked at it from the Borg point of view and went, not the right abstraction, right? And so we came at it from this Borg point of view, and you're right, it has happened so fast.
I mean, I'm a little older than you, Tim, but I remember the hypervisor catching on, right? And that probably took at least 4 or 5 years before you had Zen and you had obviously VMware became a monster, and the Red Hat, was it KVR or whatever, but this has happened in half the time of the hypervisor. So it's crazy now, but I think again, sometimes the stars just line up right? And I think one of the things that's helped us with Kubernetes is the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and we're going to be hearing from, Dan Kahn and some of the other board members of CNCF later. Did you have any insight? Obviously, I think CNCF has become a catalyst for acceleration of Kubernetes in the market. I don't want to use the term dominance, but Kubernetes' place in the market. Did you see that coming at all, or what, if you can, just not speaking on behalf of the whole team, speaking on behalf of Tim, what did you think when, the idea of, hey, let's give Kubernetes to the CNCF, to the Linux Foundation in essence? And
that was part of the conversation really early on.
Was it?
We knew, even though we wanted to go big with open source, we knew that there's a sort of inherent mistrust of corporate-owned open source sometimes, right? And Google, honestly, had not earned a great track record with putting things out and then sort of abandoning them. And so we wanted to make sure we didn't sort of fall victim to our ancestors' mistakes. Mm-hmm. And so it was really important that we get it out into a place that wasn't going to go away. Even if Google's interest dried up and blew away, that it was safe, right? And we wanted to get ownership. We wanted to get people who had full project access from day one. right? And it was super important that you get the Red Hats and the Core OSs and the other people who had full access. Like, not just I can tinker around and send patches, but I can check things in, I can approve things. That was super important from the beginning. So the foundation, I think, was really part of the strategy. And there was a lot of discussion of, do we want the Kubernetes Foundation, or, what is the scope of this thing? What are we going to call it? What is the mission really? And I think the term cloud native took a while to catch on. And even at the beginning, I remember telling it to people, and they were like, well, what does that mean, right? But I think the mindset has started to really work for people, and I think that the choice of words there was really brilliant.
I have to agree with you. So, my background is more in cybersec now, but we called it InfoSec. And I remember when cloud security first, became a thing. And so cloud native to us was readily apparent, because too many people were taking, endpoint security, moving into the cloud and saying, voila, cloud security. We knew you had to have security designed in the cloud, for the cloud, by the cloud. And I think it's gone beyond security now to software. But the other thing about it, though, is, again, who's the caboose and who's the engine here? Without Kubernetes, I don't know how much of this cloud native movement that we have today would exist.
I agree. Kubernetes, I think, was the catalyst that helps people see how things could be done. Docker was maybe the raw materials, and Kubernetes is the thing that really got the chain reaction going. Yeah. It took this idea from abstract of, we can manage your deployments for you, don't worry about it, into the really concrete of like, look, really, it's that easy. I remember doing a talk at Usenix Lisa a few years back, and I did a room full of sysadmins, classic Unix sysadmin people, right? Of which I considered myself one of. I spent a lot of time doing that. And I went up there and I basically automated 2/3 of their jobs on the stage, right? And afterwards, people came up to me and were like, this is incredible. Like, how did you do that, right? Now, of course, there was the other third who was skeptical or had really great questions or comments, and I hope that we've addressed a lot of those now. But I remember feeling really, at that moment, that day, that we hit it. We hit something.
Right. That's amazing. Tim, if you don't mind, I want to turn our interview now from backward looking to forward looking. So as we sit here now, it's the summer of 2019. The next KubeCon is actually later this month in Shanghai, and then there'll be one in San Diego in the fall, winter. Where are we going? I mean, has Kubernetes, are we in a post-Kubernetes world now, or what's the story?
We love to talk about boring infrastructure, right? That's sort of the key words. We've been quoted on these things all the time, and I think we're getting there. I hope that a couple of years from now, we're not talking about what's hot in the newest release of Kubernetes. That it's sort of like the Linux kernel. Like, there's some stuff in there, but the vast majority of people, the vast majority of their problems are already solved, right? And they're working with it, and new releases come out, but nobody feels urgent pressure to pick them up. That unless you're bleeding edge, right, or you're building these things, and that it's just sort of a non-issue. People don't worry about where they're getting their Kubernetes or how it looks or whether it works well. It's just a thing that you use, right? And people are focusing their energy on the exciting stuff that's happening up the stack, right? Yeah. Whether that's the service meshes. I mean, that's sort of the next thing today. So where are we going to be in 2 or 3 years? Probably beyond that, right? I mean, I hope so. There's the serverless frameworks, and there's you're going to build more and more abstractions up and up the stack, which just benefits users. The higher up the stack people can live, the better off they're going to be.
Agreed. And you mentioned a couple of things I wanted to hit on: service mesh and Istio, and but all of these things, again, so much in technology is evolutionary, not revolutionary, and it's built. So we have that container Docker container, and we have the Kubernetes kind of thing on it, and now you're going to have mesh on top. But really what we're building, and I spoke about it today, I was at a conference, I think I mentioned to you in San Francisco, what we've really built here is a new OS for the data center. And that data center happens to be the cloud in most cases, but it's a new OS there that, and it was probably time, to tell you the truth, because even though we had the hypervisor, we were still running our old OSs on top of them to 95%.
We're still running our old OSs in there, right? But they're now a tiny little detail of the implementation that most users are not particularly coupled to.
No.
Right.
Right. I mean, and you know this as well as I. There was times where we have religious wars about even what Linux distribution you were using, right?
Yeah.
You don't hear that as much anymore with.
And well, now it's which cloud are you using, or which Kubernetes are you using, or which network drivers are you using, which service mesh are you using, right? People love to factionalize, and they will do that no matter what we do. If we can give them good things to argue about, like the relative merits of different systems, that's a great thing to argue about.
Better to argue about that than some of the older things we've argued about. You mentioned serverless.
Sure.
So we have, you know, we get a lot of interest on that from our audience. And you know, some people say, well, you still need Kubernetes with serverless. Other people say, not necessarily. What's kind of your view on serverless and the Kubernetes relationship?
I don't think you need Kubernetes for serverless. I think the abstractions should be relatively sealed and hermetic. You know, Kubernetes is a great way for serverless systems to sort of pop the hood and let users get down into the guts of things. So if you're running a serverless on top of Kubernetes, to be able to say, look, this isn't working for me anymore, I need more control, that you just sort of open the escape hatch and drop down a layer, and now you control all the pieces. Right?
No longer serverless.
Exactly. Right. But you made that choice, right? And you know sort of where the boundaries are of the different layers. I think that's a really great model to shoot for. I don't think it requires that things be Kubernetes. Like literally, they don't have to be. As long as you can capture this experience that I think users want, I think that's the win.
So I think there's two views on it. One is the user view. What you're saying is, can I capture what the users want? Great. But I think a flip side to it is, I learned this when we built an intrusion detection. We moved it to intrusion prevention, so automatic blocking. People love the idea in abstract, but in practice, I don't want you blocking anything until I made sure you really. And it's the same thing with moving to serverless. Yeah, I'll let it do that to a point, but I need to know that at the drop of a hat I can.
Maybe.
Drop back in.
I mean, you know, I'm a big fan of systems like App Engine, right, which were like 10 plus years ahead of its time.
Yeah.
It's still an amazing system. It's just not in alignment with the rest of the industry trend right now, right? So when you look at things like Knative, right, where you capture some of the ideals of App Engine, but you say, look, it's done on Kubernetes, in a Kubernetes way, in a Kubernetes style, I think that's a really powerful abstraction. And, you know, it's really skeletal and primitive right now, but if you sort of squint and play out the sort of App Engine-y serverless framework, you know, pick your favorite serverless, I think there's amazing possibilities there, all the way up to including things like Lambda, right? Yeah. Where Lambda sort of right now positioned as the holy grail of, I don't need to know anything about what's happening. I just write some code and ta-da.
And run it. Yeah. So you mentioned Lambda. Well, I don't want to get into a Google Cloud or anything like that. Last question for you, Tim, and we've taken enough of your time. And so what's next for Tim?
What's next for me? I have more work to do. Kubernetes is not done in any sense. It's somewhat fractal. The closer I get to it, the more details we see and we need. So there's a ton of work to do, and there's exciting stuff to do, really sort of phase 2 stuff, right? I think we're coming to the end of what I think of as phase 1 of Kubernetes, right? Ubiquity is close. The APIs are starting to show their age. We're starting to see the cracks and the gaps, and we're looking for enhancements, better ways of describing things that are that warrant the level of complexity that we didn't want to build into the system at the beginning, right? I spend a lot of my time looking at networking, so I'm looking at all the gaps around networking and multi-cluster and those sorts of issues, and they're plenty, right? We have real customers who are doing amazing things. They need multiple clusters, they need multiple environments, they need multi-tenancy, they need bigger storage, deeper integrations. I'm really interested by these things, and I'm going to spend my next years looking at that.
I think it's a worthy call. Very good. Tim, thanks so much. Tim Hockin of Google's engineering team, one of the original Kubernetes team members and a continuing force in the community. Thank you very much, and we hope you have a great rest of our day here at the Kubernetes Ecosystem Summit.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts, this is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and TechStrong.tv.
Over the last couple of years, the DevOps Institute has been conducting their upskilling report for the humans of DevOps. And it really focuses on which of the skills that the market and the humans of DevOps feel are most in demand, that are most important to succeed in today's technological world, get a great job, etc. This is a session Jane did at our TechStrong Con back in June based upon last year's survey. And it has some really great insights into what are the skill sets the market is requiring of people. I put it up here today because I want to make a plea to you to go take this year's survey. It takes just a few minutes. Head on over to DevOpsInstitute.com and you can click through to it and take this year's survey. It'll help for next year's report. And you know what? This year is such a crazy year, right? 2020, it's obvious. And with everything going on in the world and the economies around the world, it's more important than ever, I think, to understand what are the skill sets, where are the gaps, what do you need to succeed in this crazy mixed up world. So here's Jane Grohl from TechStrong Con in June on upskilling for success, humans of DevOps from TechStrong 2020.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jane Grohl, CEO of the DevOps Institute. I'm really excited to be here at the TechStrong conference. And today, what I really want to talk about is upskilling for what we're now calling the hybrid human, particularly for the hybrid TechStrong human for 2020 and beyond. So if you're not familiar with DevOps Institute, I really am delighted to introduce you. Our mission is to advance the humans of DevOps, and we do that by equipping those humans with what we call SKIL, skills, knowledge, ideas, and learning. And we do that by accrediting and orchestrating SKIL through our certifications, through our research. We have learning opportunities. We do monthly virtual conferences. And then I think most importantly, we really try to connect the community, the very global community, to each other. So I invite you to become a member of the DevOps Institute community. It is free. So go up to our website, www.devopsinstitute.com, and you can become a member and start enjoying some of those benefits today. So I want to start our upskilling story today by acknowledging that the world has shifted very suddenly, very drastically in 2020. I don't think I'm telling you anything that you're not aware of. It's unprecedented that, seriously, the whole world shut down. And as much as we honor the first responders, the healthcare workers, those that had to go to essential businesses, grocery workers, delivery folks. And of course, they've really helped us ride out this terrible storm. I also think that the unsung heroes of the pandemic is the global tech community, right? Many organizations had to pivot so quickly without much notice, and depending on the state of their technology, whether they were cloud-based, on-prem infrastructure, a little bit of all of the above, the status of their applications, pretty much most of the world had to transform from likely an office-based environment to a remote environment, over the course of a week or two. And so a strong exercise in continuity for sure, but also I think a strong exercise in terms of what is required for transformation. And so, again, as members of the tech community, I applaud you. I think that this situation has illustrated several things for the enterprises, particularly as far as the competitive advantage of their tech. And hopefully today we can take a little bit of a look at what's needed as we move beyond the pandemic and into this new decade. So we're looking at the new normal. I don't know what the new normal looks like. I don't know that you do either. But there are certain things I think that are very, very clear. First of all, digital transformation for the enterprise is really no longer optional. If the pandemic has shown us anything, it's really amplified the need for transformation, that the way we might have done, not even just pre-pandemic, but the way some enterprises, particularly those with a lot of legacy, have been operating over the last 10 or 20 years, likely is not going to be as competitive as we move into our digital future. I actually think the pandemic pushed us 2 to 5 years into a place from a technical perspective that we would have ended up anyhow, right? We would have had more work from home. We would have had more migration to the cloud. We would have needed to look at doing things smaller and more simply. So I do think that while the pandemic has been horrible on its human toll, I do think it has pushed us into a new normal, perhaps faster than we would have expected, but we would have gotten there anyhow. So digital transformation is no longer optional. And in order to succeed at digital transformation, we have to have humans that are upskilled, cross-skilled, and in some cases even reskilled, particularly as we look at the talent gaps that existed before the pandemic, and of course the growing need for different skill sets within the technology stack. And I think some of that's going to come from people inside our space. Some of it may even come from reskilling individuals that perhaps lost their jobs and are now looking for new careers. So, let's not focus too much on what the new normal is, but let's definitely look at some of the indicators that will point individuals and organizations towards new skills, new approaches. And I'm not going to be the one to tell you that. We're going to look at some data coming from DevOps Institute's 2020 Upskilling Enterprise DevOps Skills Report. Which skills do you need? How do you know? And that's, I think, the origins of this research project. We've been doing the upskilling report now for 2 years. Third year is going to kick off very, very quickly. Very grateful to the sponsors that have supported our ability to do this. But the origins of the report are pretty simple. In a space as large as IT, whether you're enterprise IT, you work for a tech company, right? In the tech space, the number of new skills that are necessary in order to adapt to this very fast acceleration of technology in our society is growing and growing and growing. And if you use the term DevOps, if you want to substitute the word IT, because DevOps really it spans all of IT, then we do need to look at what are the new skills and how do you know, right? How do you know as an individual which skills you should be grooming? How do you know as an organization which skills you should be upskilling or hiring? And which of those large number of skills are really going to be important to your digital future? Well, that's the question DevOps Institute has been asking and hopefully gathering some data that will be helpful to you over the last couple of years. Which skills are considered must have, nice to have, and not as important across 4 major categories of skills? And we'll get deep into the data in just a minute. So not surprisingly, pre-pandemic, 52% of the respondents to this global community research project said the DevOps journey is difficult. I think what's more interesting is that it almost equally divided the difficulty among 3 major segments: people, process, and technology. So it isn't just that the automation aspects are hard, or that trying to align processes like ITIL and continuous delivery and site reliability engineering and agile software development, but the human aspect of it was equally difficult as well. And we know from the data that the race for DevOps humans, those that are looking at the talent gap and how do we fill the need for these digitally transformed humans, there's a race for that. And again, let's go back to this report. The research was done through the end of last year, and then the report was released on March 10th. So again, if you think about timing, this is data that is not influenced by what's been happening in the world the last couple of months, but also I think is an indicator of that acceleration. So 52% said they were currently recruiting or plan to recruit those with quote unquote DevOps skills over the next 12 months. 17% said they didn't know, 13% said they had no plans for recruiting. Bet you some of that has changed so far. And 11% said they had completed their recruiting cycle. And again, I would be very, very interested to see as we start the 2021 report and the data and survey that goes behind it, how much of that stays the same or not. What was fascinating and also a little bit disappointing is that only 31% of the over 1,200 respondents said that their organization had a formal upskilling program. Now, we know that there are some very high-profile upskilling programs. FedEx, Amazon have both very publicly announced their investments in upskilling programs for their employees. But as of December, only 31% had a formal program, 38% didn't, and about 20% said they were starting to develop a program. Again, I'll be really interested as we start to look into the next year, based on what's happened this year, whether some of that data has changed. But 31%, right? And that's across the globe. I mean, a lot of this data really is coming in regionally from North America, from EMEA, from APAC. So this is not necessarily unique to, say, North America or to Europe. This is across the entire globe. So the categories that we looked at very specifically in terms of what do we think the DevOps human needs? Now, we use the term human very specifically because regardless of where you live, your gender, other characteristics, we're all human. And so when we look at kind of the holistic approach to skilling, upskilling for what we now affectionately call the DevOps human, it really does break into certain key categories, right? What's your process skills and knowledge? Because in order to operate efficiently, you have to have some process. It doesn't necessarily need to be rigid process, but you need to understand process, because process is going to underpin your automation. It's going to underpin other aspects of your organization. What about your human skills? Formerly known as soft skills, we don't think soft skills are soft. We think they're hard. So we've reframed them as your human-to-human skills. Your automation skills, right? So we know that in order to digitally transform, you need to be able to have intelligent automation that helps to achieve some of the redundant tasks. And if you look at those top three categories, you can see that they're almost statistically equal. So the respondents, and again, we'll drill a little bit deeper into the data, but the respondents for 2 years in a row have felt that your process, your human, and your automation skills are almost equal in terms of their importance. Equal if you're looking for a job and you're looking to be hired, equal if you're an organization that is looking to identify talent, equal if you are an existing organization and you're looking to grow and help that organization be successful. So process skills, human skills, automation skills, almost equal across the board. And we'll take a little look at even the different layers of roles within the organization. And then next up is your functional knowledge, right? Certain areas of practice. We'll take a little look at that as well. What I thought was particularly fascinating is the bottom three. So most of the respondents, and let me tell you that half of the respondents 2 years in a row have self-identified as operations, and 50% have self-identified as development, with gradients in there, right, with security. And of course, we can look at the different layers of, say, the C-suite, the management layer, or the practitioner. But across the board, your knowledge of an individual vertical market, right? So if you're looking at healthcare, if they're looking to retain somebody in the healthcare space, perhaps it's an advantage knowing, the healthcare industry, but not a must-have. Specific automation tools, understanding critical thinking or best practices around architecture, CD pipelines, APIs, much more important than understanding specific tools and even specific certifications. And again, really interested to see what this looks like next year. So let's take a look at those different categories, because I think it's really fascinating. First of all, from a C-suite, a management level, the individual contributor, practitioner, and the contractor, they all agreed equally across the 1,260 respondents that process skills were a must-have. Right? There's not even a little bit of distance between the different roles. Automation, pretty much. I mean, we definitely felt that the management layer for automation skills and human skills felt those were much more important. But again, think of the management layer as most likely being the hiring layer, right? The layer within IT that's going to do most of the hiring or even most of the upskilling. But there's a lot of agreement here, right? There's a lot of agreement across all of the layers that those human skills, those automation skills, those process skills are really essential as part of your ingredients in terms of being a really valuable contributor to the organization's digital transformation, even on the contractor side, right? Individual contractors, really did feel that those human skills, those automation skills, and those process skills were cool. And then there's also some agreement on the others, right? There's some agreement on the need for business skills. The C-suite felt more strongly that business skills were important, whereas the management layer felt that functional skills were important. So again, we're going to drill deeper into this, but I think it's really fascinating looking at some of the differences between where you sit in the organization. So let's start looking at some granulated data with human skills, right? So as I said before, formerly known as soft skills, at DevOps Institute, we feel really clearly that human skills, that first of all, soft skills are hard, and that they really are human to human skills. So again, here we're going to start to look at a little bit of the regional differences between North America, EMEA, and just globally. And I think universally, being a good collaborator, being somebody that's very cooperative is most important across all of the regions. And again, being a good collaborator means you're really comfortable asking for others' opinions, asking for input, giving feedback, right? Cooperating with other teams, breaking down those silos. And then following on that, interpersonal skills, right? Your ability to relate to other people, your ability to solve problems. And then as you work your way further down, there's a lot of emphasis year over year on empathy, right? The ability for you to put yourself in the shoes or to see through the lens of another person. And so, empathy speaks to respect, it speaks to trust, certainly it speaks to diversity and inclusion. So all of these are ingredients in the collaborative DevOps human. And by the way, they're not always organic, right? You can learn these skills. There are techniques for dealing with conflict. There are techniques for you to really improve your ability to be empathic. So these are not like either you've been born with them or you're not. And I think organizations are starting to realize that some of the upskilling they need to do are as much on the human side as they are on the technical side. Transformational servant leaders will be the norm as we move forward. Agile introduced us to the concept of a servant leader, transformational leadership, which is very inspirational, right? Servant leaders protect the team, transformational leaders inspire. And the combination of the two is going to be the future as opposed to a leader who directs, right? You do this, you do that. We're definitely seeing indicators that there's a shift towards much more of a transformational servant approach. And then the other critical success factor is to be a continuous learner, right? To be curious, to experiment, to work with others, to do training, to get certified, right? But to be somebody that's constantly growing, because frankly, the shelf life of your current skills is shorter than it's ever been before. So again, coming out of this, the message is really pay attention to your human skills, right? And if you're a hiring manager or you're a manager that promotes training, don't think this is something that people either have or they don't. It's definitely something that could be taught. Okay, kind of moving forward, we look at functional skills. A couple of things that are a little different this year than last year. Last year, IT operations was in the #1 spot, and this year it tied with security practices. So everyone in IT, regardless of your role, has got to develop some core security practices. It's one of the reasons concepts like DevSecOps have really grown. But remember, I told you half are operations, half are development. And there's a clear message here that you need to understand the 3 key elements. Now, you don't have to be an expert, right? We're going to talk a little bit about that. But the 3 key elements of IT are development and operations and security. And as a DevOps human, you need to be hybrid, right? You need to have your core competency, but you also need to have just enough knowledge about the areas that are not native to you, right? We're looking at now something called the hybrid product team, where the team is no longer just a group of developers or just a group of operations folks, right? We're looking not only at a team that's cross-skilled or that is multi-skilled, we're looking at individuals that are also cross-skilled and multi-skilled to just enough, right? How much security do you need to know? How much testing do you need to know? But that the team is very holistic in terms of its skilling, so that if somebody's on vacation, the team doesn't stop, or if there's an incident and somebody's on vacation, we're not paralyzed, right? So it is very much looking at this cross-skilled approach to teaming. It's also looking at measuring customer value instead of, internal focus, like how often did we release? For a customer, that's not necessarily important. So the hybrid product team is growing as well, and hopefully you'll be a part of that. Now, I mentioned before about process and framework skills, and actually this rose to the #1 spot, whereas last year, I think it was #2 or 3. But look at these processes, right? It's not necessarily, do you know ITIL or Agile or Site Reliability Engineering or any of the other frameworks that are popular in IT. The top half of this for the second year in a row is really critical thinking process, right? So what's your experience with source control? Do you understand flow? And pay attention to that, right? Can you understand your value stream? Can you understand flow? Do you understand the core concepts of the software development lifecycle or what it means to be agile, right? And then the bottom half is very much supported by some of the frameworks like SRE, like we're now seeing value stream mapping, test-driven development, Scrum, right? So those are great enablers of the top half of process and frameworks. But the message here is that process not only shapes behavior, process is what's needed to underpin your automation. Automation replicates process, not the other way around. So again, when you go deeper into this report, you can really see some indicators that these are must-have skills, as opposed to, how many skills do you have in a particular framework. Now, we saw some interesting growth indicators here. While certainly DevOps and Agile adoption is growing, here's the disruptor. If you're not familiar with site reliability engineering, it's been on the scene for a while, coming out of the Google book of the same name, but we saw a pretty significant rise in framework adoption and interest in site reliability engineering as an operational practice, right? Looking at it from a people, process, and automation perspective. Really interesting, really disruptive. DevOps Institute has declared June as Site Reliability Engineering Month. I'll tell you at the end about a couple of things you can do to learn a little bit more about that. But if you're not familiar with SRE, you can read the Google book for free on their website. But this is something to pay attention, particularly if you come from the operational side of the house, or if you come from the ITSM side of the house, because Google does consider SRE to be its service management framework. So again, Agile and DevOps are growing, but SRE is quickly starting to catch up. And then, technical skills, right? Last year it was cloud, and it still is, right? And I think, again, the pandemic is going to move more organizations to the cloud or to be hybrid much more quickly. But this year, CI/CD tool chains took the top spot. So while being in the cloud is important, also being able to build pipelines that allow you to deploy faster, to test more frequently, right? To really embed things like testing and security, build and deploy, really took the top spot. And I think we're seeing a lot of that in direction. But pay attention to number 3 with APIs. Can't have a good CI/CD toolchain without APIs. So those top 3 really are your most significant technical skills. And you notice they're not specific to a tool or an application. Sure, understanding Kubernetes and containers is very, very important, but all of that is in support of CI/CD, cloud, and APIs. So technology also shapes your behavior. But if you think you're going to get to DevOps specifically through just automation, that's not necessarily going to be your full path. So kind of just trying to wrap up a little bit, I want to tell you about T-shaped and E-shaped people. And again, I know that as an attendee, you probably come from a wide variety of tech roles, or maybe you're even thinking about a tech career. And I would certainly encourage you to do that. I'm an accidental technologist from a bit ago. But as IT has grown up, we've kind of groomed this I-shaped model where IT, enterprise IT in particular, is built on specialists, right? So teams of specialists that have a specialist manager, and maybe they roll up to a specialist director. And a lot of the work that has caused delay has been a result of handoff, right? Where, the developers develop and then they send it downstream to security and to QA and to build, release, and deploy, right? And again, there's an inherent delay there. So last year, we encouraged people to go from being an I-shape to being a T-shape, which meant you still had your specialty, right? You still have your core knowledge, but you supplement it by filling the top of your T with a broad range of general knowledge. Maybe you are a test-driven developer, right? So you're not an expert QA or an expert tester, but you know enough to write test cases, to read test logs, right? To be able to help shape some of the automation. Security, I just said everybody has to learn security. And so having that broad general knowledge, I think is essential for everyone so that we can have security starting way earlier in the cycle and continuing past production. So you want to think about how you fill the top of your T with broad knowledge. Certainly your human skills, right? Really being able to accelerate your human skills. Well, T-shaping is great, but this year and beyond, we've gone another level deep. And we're now encouraging you to be E-shaped. Now, it's not just a different letter of the alphabet, right? We understand that your T is built, first of all, on your ability to have good, deep knowledge about process. Because regardless of whatever role you play, you're going to have to, whether it's agile process, whether it's SRE, whether, light process, complex process, you do need to understand flow. Right? If nothing else, you need to understand flow. And so that has to be a deep competency. You also need to focus on your human skills, right? And to be better at empathy, to really think about your collaboration approach, your cooperation approach, and particularly creating kind of a matrix hybrid product team. And within that, you're going to have automation skills, functional skills, and technical skills that will support your human skills and your process skills. But I think the most important element of the E is your experience, right? And you can only get experience by doing something, right? By being comfortable exploring, by looking at execution, by experimenting, right? And so part of the DevOps principle is we want you to experiment. We want you to be a continuous learner. And the best way to evolve as a hybrid tech-strong human is by having experience, kind of like getting your driver's license, right? You take a road test, which is theoretical. You take some kind of test that shows, the basic functions of a car. But really how you become a skilled driver is by getting on the road. And so all of these are elements in what we're now calling the hybrid tech-strong DevOps human. It's with upskilling. That's a journey you have to take, hopefully with the support of your organization. So I think there's a key part of it. Leaders have to lead a different way. And some of that's taking you out of the comfort zone, because a leader that might have been more directive in their past now have to become transformational, which means they inspire people to do something different, to act differently, but they also serve the team as opposed to the team serving them. And so that's promoting a new way of working. And I think there's a lot of good case studies that are starting to evolve about that. And then organizations have to stand out there and foster and reward learning, whether it's a formal upskilling program, whether it's peer-to-peer, whether it's reimagining the makeup of the team. Organizations have to commit to that change. And they also have to look at measuring things different so that customer value and customer experience are really the critical pieces of that. So again, I gave you a really high level look at some of the data that's in the upskilling report. You are absolutely invited to go to DevOpsInstitute.com, become a free member. There's some really great assets up there, but you also can download the full report. It's pretty deep. There's a lot of data, particularly on the regional side. There's some insight from different lenses, from enterprise leaders, from recruiting leaders. So again, please go ahead and download the report. It's free. Share it with your colleagues. It's a really great talking focal point to figure out where you need to be, and of course, where your organization needs to be. So thank you. I've been saying in order to be tech strong, we have to have strong tech, and we only get strong tech through strong humans. So appreciate the opportunity to share with you some of this data today. If you are interested in growing some of your skills, DevOps Institute is hosting a monthly microconference, a virtual microconference, where each month we take a particular topic and we put it under the microscope with speakers and chat and sponsors and others. And this June happens to be Site Reliability Engineering Month. So June 18th, we will be hosting a micro conference. And again, if you're in the operations space, I would certainly encourage you to register. It's free. They're pretty cool conferences. So I hope you'll take advantage of that. So on that note, again, I'm Jane Grohl. I'm CEO of the DevOps Institute. It's been my pleasure to be with you here at the TechStrong conference, and I wish you good health and I wish you good skills. Thanks very much.
Okay, up next, a little news from around the MediaOps neighborhood. Let me tell you what's going on some of our sites. Over on Security Boulevard, we have the Cyber Hero Adventure Show. Joins the MediaOps lineup. So I'm happy to announce that Gary Berman, the host of the Cyber Hero Adventure Show, is joining our TechStrong TV family, and you'll be able to see an updated production version of his shows, which are pretty great to begin with, on TechStrong TV starting in the next couple of days. Gary wrote an article about why he's doing it and why he joined the team here, and really good stuff. Take a read of it and welcome Gary aboard, and congratulations to him. Next, we have Cutting Through the Noise of SOC Overload. And this is by a good friend of mine, Ofer Israeli. Ofer is the CEO founder of Elusive Networks. And it is, Elusive's making great progress, deception technology and so forth. And Ofer is always interesting. I've had the pleasure of interviewing him a number of times. So do check out his article. And then we have Netscope launches Cloud Threat Exchange. I think that's a good move from the folks over at Netscope, and you should go read more about that. On Container Journal, we have Kubler, news out of our friends at Kubler. They ally with Cloud America to rein in Kubernetes cost. I think that's an area we're going to see kind of just as we saw it with cloud costs in general. Fairwinds, who, by the way, put on some of the best webinars that we do here at MediaOps. Fairwinds launches their Gemini project. Go check out what that's about. Interesting company, Fairwinds. And then 5 methods for Kubernetes application access control. All good stuff on Container Journal. There's so much going on around Kube and the whole cloud native microservices space. Make sure you check those out. And then on DevOps.com, we have how continuous transformation can deliver more value. When it's time to migrate away from COBOL. Not going to touch that. Lenovo updates server portfolio. Micro Focus launches hybrid cloud platform. And CloudBolt acquires cloud cost control tool. So cost control seems to be a trend here, whether it's in Kubernetes or the cloud in general. Anyway, that's the stories around our MediaOps neighborhood sites for today. Of course, there's so much more on all 3 of the sites. Do go check them out. But for now, let's head over to our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon, who has some great interviews as well as a webinar preview.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at MediaOps, and I'm here now with Lynn Klassen, who is the VP of Public Cloud Product at a company called Insono. Lynn, thank you so much for taking a couple minutes and talking with me today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, being at a company that is a cloud provider or a public cloud product provider, if you will, you'd think we'd want to have a conversation about clouds, but no. Let's talk about the gender gap in trade show conferences. And, you and I are both females. So of course we've both experienced some of the things that a study that you guys just recently put together have experienced in the past. So tell me a little bit about why you guys did a study of all things on gender inequality, maybe is the best word to use,
right.
At conferences and trade shows.
Yes. So we started this. This is actually our second annual report, and we started doing this a year ago. And I think the impetus is a tweet that I sent out while I was attending a large industry conference. And like how women will always complain that whenever we go to theaters or movie theaters, we always have trouble with the long lines at the ladies' room. Whereas, when I was there, I realized I was the only person in this gorgeous and super clean, restrooms, with lounge chairs and everything. So really, I kind of treated it's a little bit lightheartedly, but I think it really sort of resonated with people that have seen the tweet. Is really, I say, hey, you know what? I would trade a clean bathroom and no line at all any day for more women, at these conferences that we all go to. So the company really took that, and we decided, what could we do, to continue the conversation, beyond this kind of lighthearted, exchange online.
Okay. All right. So you guys conducted this study, and what is it? What were some of the results that came from the study? What did you guys discover?
So I think, this year we still see that 71% of women who have given a keynote speech say that the conferences that they attended, were not designed with women in mind. And that's kind of the angle, the approach that we decided to take this year. We decided to take the sort of focus on a design mindset. Just the physical spaces and the small things, that really sort of put together a conference in terms of, say, if we're talking about people, process, and technology, right? So we definitely have started talking about people, with the Me Too movement. We have processes where, because last year we really talk about, the importance of having code of conduct and really visibly, publicize it, the importance of that. And this year we decided, let's talk about technology, that are being used at these conferences. And things like, the podium may be too tall, too high, the microphone may be too tall, or the AV equipment is designed for, a suit jacket with a lapel, and if you're a woman, you show up in a dress, it often tends to create some kind of, last minute, issue, right before you have to go on stage. So,
Right. Yeah. And even the tall bar stools that they put up on stage sometimes.
Exactly. Thank you for mentioning that. Exactly. Right.
I've had that issue myself.
Right. So. And so really the thinking is, we've had people ask, these are small things, like why it's important and we talk about it. Right. And I think we've all heard the phrase, death by 1,000 cuts. And I think, with these kind of sort of design elements, from the get-go, you have this visceral reaction that this place did not expect me to be here. It's very loud pronouncement that the keynote speakers, for instance, are always presumed to be male. And, so we want to show the data and really to sort of encourage an ongoing conversation.
Interesting. Makes sense. Makes total sense. And, in any normal year, shall we say, these conversations would be, I think probably kind of brushed under the rug because, there's so many other things going on. But this year seems really different in a number of ways, obviously. Not only the pandemic and the fact that so many people are stuck at home, which also means that so many conferences have gone online. So some people might say, well, what do we care now because it's all virtual? But at the same time, we are having the conversation now about the social aspects. Just the economic climate that we're all living in and the socioeconomic climate that we're all living in. A lot of people are really more aware of, those people who are around them in their sphere, but are, they're not a white male who is 6 feet tall or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not all the same.
And so,
but it just seems like we're at two opposite ends of the spectrum. As even though we're all at home, we're all very much more aware of other people and are maybe taking these things into consideration more. But do you think that we are ever actually going to go back to a live conference? And if so, do you think that the fact that we have kind of because we've all been cocooning basically, but we've become more empathetic, I hope. Do you think that these considerations are actually going to be, part of the agenda at conferences in the future?
I think that's a great question. Thank you very much. I actually am seeing that there are two ways of sort of answering your question. One way is that we should all take this opportunity while everybody is doing everything virtual to really rethink how conferences should be run. And I think as a woman, and we all understand, oftentimes it's not that easy for us to just pick up and go. Statistically, especially women with children tend to be the one that's, having the burden of, I have to make sure all the 100 things are aligned before I'm allowed to set foot outside of the house. And I think, with
that never happens.
With the virtual conference now being the norm, I am actually seeing the sort of positive trend of more women being able to join conferences, because we kind of remove the need to travel and the travel planning, and also more female keynote speakers, being invited, to represent, to be given a voice, on the center stage, virtually. And I think, this will allow us, once we do go back to the 3D world, I know there are certain conferences that will immediately go back to the physical world. And it really gives us an opportunity to reflect and say, okay, so what are the blockers that we thought before all this happened, before we all went virtual? So how come we could do it when we were all virtual? But now all of a sudden we're getting back to the 3D world, and all of a sudden it's an issue. For instance, companies sending, I think the high percentage of women surveyed believe that the company, if have a choice, will actually send a male colleague, to conferences. So we actually have this opportunity to reflect and ask, difficult questions. And so the other way to look about this is that now we're all virtual. There are actually a lot of tools we could use. For instance, you have the hand raising app. We have chat rooms, or sort of chat threads, when a panel is ongoing or discussion is ongoing. And, there are also sort of breakout rooms, that these technology companies are sort of rolling out in terms of video conferencing technologies. And I think it'd be interesting to think, okay, so once we move this into a physical world, is there a way to continue to take advantage of these tools? Right, to sort of help drive a better way for us to all be able to jump in and speak up, versus, I think that's a common, sort of perception that women tend to be talked over a lot.
Yeah, no, I agree also. And I also think that the great thing about virtual conferences is the fact that, they're not always, they're live events, but some of the sessions can be pre-recorded. So it does offer a level of convenience that really can help anybody, male, female, whatever. But I also wonder if they also kind of level the playing field in that if you're virtual, there are no inherent biases. When I talk to somebody virtually, I don't know I might know if they're male or female, but I don't know if they're older, if they're younger, if they have a ring in their nose, or if they have a mohawk or whatever.
Right, exactly.
It really doesn't matter to me. It's, it's really the quality of the conversation at the end of the day. So, it kind of makes me wonder actually if virtual conferences, will become the majority of the events, if you will, and then the live events will just be more, the in-person events will be the minority. So kind of interesting, but at that point, I think maybe we'll. Maybe just because of the way things are, the conversation about sexual harassment and the way women are perceived and treated and at these live events. I think that conversation will be changing definitely.
Yeah. So I'm hopeful. That this year we have to take this opportunity. So speaking of silver lining, right? I mean, obviously this is not ideal, but I believe that human beings are inherently resilient, and we all walk away, with lessons, from any experience we have. And, and sort of excited and hopeful that we really are going to take, what we have learned, when we're all in the house, cooped up and all online, and then take that lesson, and go forward. So.
I think you're right. I think, we are definitely going to walk away with some true knowledge that we never would have gotten any other way before. So,
yeah,
Lynn, thank you very much. I'm really, what I'm really interested in seeing if this is the second. I want to see next year's report and see what transpires out of that, because it'll be a completely different conversation.
Exactly, because I can't wait to see the data. So we can do compare and contrast, and what you have been alluding to, throughout the conversation is that how, what kind of change, will this drive?
Mm-hmm.
And, you are, in the DevOps world, we are in the technology world, and, cultural change. I think that's kind of the mission, right? The inherent mission we all have.
Right.
And again, I know I'm repeating myself, I'm just really excited, to see what next year will look like.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's make a date. This time next year, we'll talk about the results of the survey and see what's changed.
Definitely. It's a date.
All right, great. Well, Lynn, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. If anybody wants to get a copy of the report, how would they get it?
They can download it from our company's website. It's ensono.com. It's ENSONO.
All right, .com. All right. Well, Lynn, thanks again. Really appreciate it and enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you very much. Likewise.
Okay, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. Happy Tuesday. Hope everybody is doing well after that long Labor Day weekend. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops. I'm here now with the Tuesday edition of the Webinars Preview. We have so many great webinars coming up on DevOps.com and Security Boulevard, and thought I'd let you know about a couple of them that are coming up. So without further ado, let's dive right on in. The first webinar I want to let you guys know about is happening September 9th at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It's called Discover How Volvo Cars Uses a Time Series Database to Become Data-Driven. This one is sponsored by Influx Data, and we have a guest by the name of Maxim Puzikov, who is a Volvo engineer. He's going to walk attendees through the way Volvo is actually using the InfluxDB technology to empower its developers through self-service monitoring tools, which in turn have enabled the teams to become more agile and collaborative while improving product development lifecycle and incident management. Good stuff, guys. It's yet another amazing use case of time series databases, so hopefully you'll have some time to join me on this webinar. The next one I want to let you know about is called Industry Best Practices for SSH Access. It's happening on Wednesday, September 9th. Also, this one is 3 p.m. Eastern, and it's happening on Security Boulevard. This one is sponsored by Gravitational, and the webinar will discuss some of the ins and outs of SSH and how organizations can improve their SSH posture. Things like switching keys for certificates, two-factor authentication, funneling access through a Bastion server, just stuff like that. Everything that can help organizations improve that, as I said, their SSH posture. Certainly, it's a must-attend for organizations who want to know more about how to use SSH properly. Good stuff. Security is always a hot topic, so I would highly suggest this webinar if you are having any issues with security in general, but you want to learn more about SSH. All right, the third webinar I want to let you know about today is happening Thursday, September 10th at 11 a.m. on DevOps.com. It's called Myth Busting in Application Security. This one is being sponsored by WhiteSource, and we have a guest speaker from Target. Her name is Jennifer Slapczewski, and she's the director of product security, and she's going to talk about how Target has actually busted many of the myths that surround application security, and how it is actually kind of worked with its developers to help the company as a whole take a different approach to effective security. That's also very, very much well beyond firewalls and scanning. So they're doing some really innovative things over there. Hopefully you will be interested enough to join us on this webinar. I think it's going to be a really interesting use case of just application security, a different way, a different approach to application security from the developer point of view. So worth checking out. Again, that one is happening Thursday, September 10th at 11 a.m. on DevOps.com. All right, that's all I have for you today for the webinars preview. I'll be back on Thursday with another set of webinars to share with you. Until then, I hope everybody stays safe.
Well, now it's time for the Analyst Corner with Mitchell Ashley, CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group. Mitch, what do you have for us today?
Mitch Ashley, CEO with Accelerated Strategies Group. Occasionally, we talk about technical stuff. We talk about what's happening in the market. We talk about changes in work with COVID. There's some new research coming out there, by the way. Also, I'll delve into leadership topics. It just to be sort of a fascination of mine. Doesn't necessarily mean that I'm a great leader. I'm a learning leader. Let's put it that way. Learn some good things, mistakes just like everybody else, and learn from those too. So I posted a few things on LinkedIn about leadership, and I've also had some previous guests talking about the people side of leadership. Carol Ross, who is a friend, a colleague of mine, works with many organizations, pretty well-known coach as well as podcast interviewer. Talk to a lot of famous people. She knows a lot of folks. I'm adding to that today. So in our next segment that we have, that's our video segment, I asked Deb Severson to join me. Now, Deb is also a friend and colleague, someone that I've known not quite as long as Carol, but who's also in this space of working with organizations. And I asked her to be on because I wanted to focus on what are the questions, what are the issues, the needs that leaders are searching for, looking for help in right now during this time of working remotely. Yes, it's kind of settled into a pattern, but then, okay, what's really working and what do we need to improve? How do we set ourselves up for success of our people, ourselves, our organization, the customer, all those things. So Deb delves into some of the things work that she does with organizations and some observations she has around what are the questions people are asking, leaders are asking specifically. Deb is CEO and founder of Exponents. So she's an author. She does both team development, leadership as coach. She's an executive coach, kind of helping people become, leaders with let's say, a higher EQ skill level in some ways, at least. It's interesting to me that it's just not an area where, aside from maybe one of my first job experiences, I've ever felt that organizations did a very good job of developing leaders. It was kind of, you're here, you're now the leader, you're now managing people, figure it out. And you either did well or you learned through the school of hard knocks, or maybe you were just bad at it. And it took a long time for somebody to tell you. It seemed like those are kind of the three paths. And for whatever reason, leadership in varying organizations, the development of leaders, let's put it that way, is not something that I've observed that most HR organizations are well equipped to do. Certainly they do really good at the transactional side, benefits and onboarding and hiring, firing, and all those kinds of things. Sometimes delve into, strategic planning of, staffing plans and skill sets and where the market is going and, doing assessments of those kind of things. But again, that often falls into more tactical things, usually where the gap is, or at least one of the gaps. And I could single out my own departments, my own areas, so I'm not picking just on HR here. But the topic of really, truly developing leaders. So it falls only to the CEO, the executive team, kind of senior leaders of the organization to really model that, maybe put something together. Maybe it's a succession plan, maybe it's other tools, but isn't really leadership development. And I find it ironic, and this is just my opinion about things, that we've elevated EQ to being the top skill that we need empathetic leaders. We need people who know how to work with people, not just to get the task done, but to help develop, grow, know, understand, and be sensitive to being aware of just what people are going through and how to help them through those growth issues or growth opportunities, whatever it may be. And I have to be honest with you, I also haven't been with a lot of executive teams that really took that as serious as I think it should be taken. It's one of the reasons that I've followed and read a lot about leadership and practiced it myself at different levels, and again, varying levels of success. And I've had some experiences that I learned a lot from. Let's put it that way. And I asked Deb to be on because I think with our situation today, we're all not only kind of finding what the new normal is, which, by the way, the new normal is not normal, but almost settling into a groove with being Zoom meetings all day, dealing with your people, checking with them the way you are. There's a lot of stuff going on in everyone's life, and not just their work life. And if you thought it was hard to separate work from personal life, which is impossible, by the way, I think that's a fallacy. It's certainly not going to happen now. Not when you're working from your home and the kids come in and want to be part of the Zoom meeting when you're giving your presentation to the customer or to the board or whatever, and dogs bark or whatever, and spouse it's time to help out with something, and you need to step away from your desk for a minute, or just weird things go wrong, doorbell rings, whatever. We're inviting each other into our homes, and so you can't separate personal from work. It's not even a realistic expectation. I don't think it ever has, but certainly isn't now. So I just wanted to give that a little bit of an introduction, share a few personal feelings and stories and observations about leadership. And I certainly comment on a lot of those things on LinkedIn, folks that I follow, and opportunities to do that. I'll do the same, because I think this is an area where we can help each other leadership is actually a team sport. It's not an individual sport. I don't mean just the people that you lead, people that you manage, whatever term you want to use. Leaders need to help other leaders. We're not all supposed to be left to figure this out on our own, or with a little bit of coaching, if it's really coaching, that you get from your boss. Maybe you have a great boss that coaches you on leadership, but I suspect a lot of people don't. Kind of left to getting stuff done on time, on budget, meeting goals, meeting KPIs, meeting whatever it is, not necessarily focusing on the development of you as a leader. I don't care whether you're at the top echelons of the organization or you're a budding young manager in your first management position. This is an area where we help each other, and our people help us, because one of the key skills we have to have is listening. So speaking of listening, enjoy this next segment with Deb Severson, and she's CEO and founder of Exponents.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Digital Anarchist.
I'm joined by Deb Severson. Deb is president and founder of Exponent. She works as a leader, as coach. She does team development. She works as an executive coach, all around leadership and people and the kind of conversations that we're having. So good to be talking with you today, Deb.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Deb and I are old friends, colleagues, former coach, customer. Our relationship connects several ways. So
yes, absolutely.
It's always great to have trusted colleagues in your network, especially when we're having these kind of conversations. So I appreciate being able to do that with you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to catch up and to talk about this. It's an important topic.
It is. It's a timely topic too. Well, let's talk a little bit, just have you tell us a little bit about your business, the kind of work that you do, and also give us some background. How did you come to this? Why is this inspired you to do this kind of work as your life's work?
Yeah, absolutely. So my company, I started in 2003. I left corporate America. That's where I had spent my career. And I'll tell you a little bit about what prompted me to move over into being an organizational performance consultancy. But basically, what we do as a company is work around transformational leadership development, leadership coaching, teaching leaders how to be more coach-like in their conversations. But as you and I were talking recently, in many ways, I see the work I do as really changing the conversation in the workplace. I think that it's the conversation that actually changes relationships. And I think relationships are a factor of performance. And so all of those pieces are integral in terms of moving the needle. Yeah.
Absolutely agree. So tell us a little bit more about sort of your corporate role and why you ventured out to go solo and build a company.
It's so interesting. It's interesting because I never, this is one of those serendipitous career changes for me. I never really saw myself going out and doing this kind of work on my own. I grew up in financial services. I managed pieces of geography. So I always was somebody that managed a P&L and a team, and I did that for a number of years. And then I ended up coming into a support role. And in that role, part of my position was around organizational performance. And we started using a coaching strategy or methodology. And just fell in love with it. I mean, and I thought, I don't want to do all that other stuff. I just want to do this. I just want to be in the conversation with people. And so that was the impetus of that change. I will say that for me, transparency, honesty, trust, those are really embedded into like who I am. And I think the way that I developed the content and the business itself. I didn't grow up necessarily in environments where there was a lot of that. And so I think my hope is that people can actually be in relationships that are real and honest and, and based on something that's just not transactional.
Mm-hmm. Well, before we dive into, you're also an author. I failed to mention that.
Yeah. I wrote a book about, in 2014. It's called The Cycle of Transformation. It's about, again, how do leaders use some of these principles? Like, how do they intentionally develop trust with the people they lead? And so I came up basically with a formula based on some of the work I'd done over the years, and also, what are some of those enablers of having a conversation that is more transparent and honest and that goes down deep, right, into what's really going on. So
let's peel off and kind of talk about today's current situation, because I know you're still actively working with customers in a different way, different form, I guess, through distancing. What do you kind of jump to the core question? What do you see that leaders are needing or asking, looking for right now, in addition to what they may have been looking for, kind of coaching and leadership development prior to COVID?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'd say there's a couple different directions that question takes me. The first is that for many people, there's a fair amount of uncertainty, which can cause all of us a sense of losing control over what's going on. And I notice that a lot of the leaders that I coach are struggling a bit more with being triggered. So, and when I say that, I mean, right, whether there's some sort of a fear in their own capabilities to weather what's going on, whether it's that fear of, I don't know what we should do right now, right? There's so many unknowns and they haven't actually been up against a situation quite like this before. So a big piece of the work I'm noticing is helping people, again, reground with like their purpose, their values. How do they use that to inspire themselves? And also, how do they recognize when they're going to that place where they're feeling disempowered, so that they can have a strategy to get back on track and grounded again? So I think that's one big piece of the work.
Okay. It's almost like just describing some of my own experiences too. It can be a sense of overwhelm. It can be a sense of sort of getting wrapped up in all the other things and trying to problem solve stuff we can't problem solve. And you sort of lose touch with who you are or what's important to you. And you're operating in this unfamiliar territory.
Yeah, I think too, to your point, it's we go through the cycles of change in a situation that we're facing today. And in that, there's also a bit of the grieving process of letting go of the way it was just 6 months ago, right? And having to come to terms with the way it is now. And how do you show up in that? As powerful as you can be, but in a situation that's very different than it was just a few short months ago.
It's funny, we talked about the new normal. I think I wrote somewhere, the new normal is not going to be normal.
Yeah, and I think there's also, so going to the other thing I think that leaders are looking for is, in that environment where what is the new normal? We don't quite know how to put a pin in it yet. When is it going to stabilize enough to be able to really execute against that, the new normal? I think there's also that tendency to want to try to jump maybe too quick without listening to the environment, or wait too long. So it's like, how do you find that way where you're listening to what's happening now and responding in the present sense. And so that can be, I think, challenging as well.
Well, it's interesting. Leaders are always, or certainly many times, leading organizations through change of different levels, sometimes very significant in our industry. It can be DevOps or technology or whatever it might be. But oftentimes you have control over those changes. This is a situation where you don't have control over what's the CDC guideline going to be, what's the company going to decide, what are my choices, what choices am I providing to the people that I work with, work for me, report to me, et cetera.
And if we go to the COVID situation, is it getting better? And or am I just waiting for the other shoe to drop? So there's all those things I think that leaders are having to grapple with. That's pretty significant. Another big factor is how many are now having to lead virtually in a way that they haven't before. And I think many senior leaders, I know I worked with a company last year where the majority of leaders were managing people that were across geography. So I think not everyone's too, they're not unfamiliar with that. But it's been exponentially ratcheted up, right, over the last few months. So I get a lot of questions about that. Like, how do we stay connected? How do we just have the sort of connection, small talk that we would have if we were in an office space together? Calendars are loaded up back to back with Zoom meetings like this one, right? And so people are having to operate a little bit differently because of that.
So what kind of guidance or what questions do you ask about how do you stay connected with your team, with people you have relationships with in the workplace?
Yeah, it's interesting because I did a piece of research last year on this and looking at some of what the research says about transformational leadership that's applied across a virtual forum. And I mean, there are some really simple fixes I think that I try to remind people of. One is have your camera on, right? It's surprising how many times that you go onto a Zoom call and there's people that don't have their camera on. And I get it. I mean, some people it's, 11 o'clock at night if they're across the world, right? And they're in their jammies or whatever they're doing. And so there's some good reasons for it. But we know from research that connection is absolutely amplified when people can see faces, even if we're not in this same, real space. So I think it's an important reminder. So we need to see each other. So that's one.
Are there other thoughts, recommendations you have about that?
Yeah, I mean, some of it has to do with like if you are over time, not necessarily in this environment, the COVID environment, but if you're going to manage teams remotely, ongoing, remember that you do need a ramping up time. You do need some time to have some casual conversations. When I think about coaching, I think one of the premises of coaching is that we get to know each other in terms of like what is important to you, not goals that are results driven. I mean, we all know that's a piece of the mix, right? But really, like what are the values that motivate who you are, and the things that are going to be important to you, and the things that are going to maybe derail you if they become compromised in some way. So you have to have that ramp up time to get to know each other as people, and so that's an important piece of the research as well.
Speaking of knowing people, it seems like this change of mode of working this way with tools like Zoom, et cetera, I noticed there's not as much listening happening. There's a lot more directing and communicating. And there's a lot of stuff going on in people's lives. Some of it's work, a lot of it's personal. Now it's blended together. It's not separated in the same way it was 6 months ago. Are you experiencing anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. In some ways, I feel like it's a good thing. Like it's not uncommon now to be on a conference call with a group of people and have, a child come and crawl up in the lap of a parent, right? Or the dogs, or, I think we're allowing ourselves to see each other a bit more. And I think that can be really, really helpful. I do think you're right. I think that, again, people are getting a bit more task focused, and it is because everything is so structured. And so how do you actually have a conversation that isn't so structured, that there's not a very specific intent, and where I can just check in with you and see, how things are going, or where you're feeling good, or where you're struggling. Where are those conversations happening? Mm-hmm. And I think they need to happen a bit more frequently than maybe they were before because of the present environment. So I think the cadence needs to go up.
More check-ins more frequently. And I think just share an opinion, I think things change much more quickly. I mean, situations like, okay, now my kids aren't going to go to school and I've got to get things ready at home for them, or whatever it might be, a situation at work. Those changes seem to happen pretty rapidly, and day to day, it's almost different.
Yeah. I think you're right. And I think that the nature of work is going to change because of this. There's no question in my mind. I think there's many people that are wondering when we're going to go back to the way that it was. And I'm not sure I think that we ever are, so, right. So there's this need for us to start to really grapple with, how do we manage virtual relationships more effectively? I'll say as a coach, most often my relationships are virtual. Mm-hmm. There's some times where you'll meet with people in person, but from a pure coaching perspective, often it's virtual. So,
well, let's step back from the COVID situation, because I want to spend some time talking about some things I know are super important to you. And that's, we use words about like this, but I think they have a whole nother level of meaning to you and the work that you do. Things like transparency for leaders and vulnerability that comes with that, and the truth. Really living the truth, not putting on the ego facade that leaders put on.
Honestly, and partly you and I know each other pretty well. To me, ego is really the biggest responsibility I think that a leader has, right? Is in many ways to manage their own ego state. Relationships that are healthy happen when people can be vulnerable with each other, when we're able to put our ego aside, right, for the sake of something that's greater, than that, the goal that we have, or the charge that we're trying to, achieve together. So there's something about understanding ego and egos that are unhealthy, and when our ego goes to what I would call a fixed mindset, which is a very disempowered state. So a lot of the work that I do with leaders is around ego. I think a lot of work that we do with teams is around ego, mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. And then, of course, I think in this day and age, another unrelated to COVID, but maybe to the current state that we're in right now, a lot of it is our own bias and not recognizing that our lens is just the lens of our life experiences. And there's many, 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 facets of worldview. So I think being able to open people up to look at things more holistically, bigger picture, the role ego plays, the role our biases and our life experiences play is huge in this day and age.
Yeah, I don't know where I came across this or made it up, and I don't mean it in a metaphysical way, but the model I have in my head is we all live in our own universe, because no one else can experience what we experience the way we do, when we do, with all the things that we bring with it. So we really aren't in the same world, at least in our heads and our worldview. But it's super easy to assume everybody should think and have and do what I know.
Absolutely. I don't know if do you remember, this is, I learned, it reminds me of something a long, long time ago. I was taking a class and we were talking about maps, and how if you look at, if you were to learn in Japan about the world, where Japan is positioned is in the center. And the same is true. Like, we look at a map of the United States. If we live in the US, and the US is what we see first, it's right there in the center. Well, it's the same with all of us. We put ourselves in the center of the map, and we look at the world from that center, right? But everybody's got a different point, a different center point. So yeah, it's big. It's a really important concept.
Talk about some of the things that So we're living in the world of remote work and COVID and economic distress and all kinds of challenges, right? And opportunities come with that too. What do you think are the things that we have now, the space or time or opportunity to work on that might have been more challenging to take on or fit in before all of this, all the change in the last 9 months?
I think even though there are, especially I don't want to emphasize the impact it's having on working families, because they've all of a sudden got home and school and childcare and everything is kind of colliding together. And in those instances, I know many of parents don't feel like they have time. The life balance is challenging. But in other circumstances, I hear people say they have had a lot more time to be reflective. Whether it was the time that they no longer have to spend driving into the office, that they're now using to plan their day. I've had several people say that they found that that's been very beneficial for them. So I think some new habits will be formed for people as a result of having to shake things up a bit. They're trying new things. And I know for me personally, it has been a good time for self-reflection, starting to notice some of your patterns during times of crisis and chaos, right? I mean, if you have a different bubble that you're living in that sometimes affords you the chance to see yourself a bit differently, I think there's a bit of that going on as well. So
it does seem that there is an opportunity for self-development, if we can label it that, right? At whatever level, working out or whatever. And also, of course, dealing with the challenges that life has with kids and balancing all that. I wonder, you talk about, you and I've talked a lot about transparency and truth and the dialogue that people have, both with themselves and the people around them. Talk about that and how that really sets up and influences that lens we see and operate in.
Well, I know in, some of the programs that we have are, both developing leaders, coach, individual, like coaching an individual, and then also coaching a team. And in all of those scenarios, I believe developing authentic trust, there's 4 different elements that I really emphasize. And one is being transparent. Some of the others are assuming greatness. I think that's really important because if we want to look for where things are broken, we'll certainly find them. But if we want to look for where people are magnificent, we'll find that too. So it's like, where do you want to put your attention? Confidence is really important. We want people to be empowered and not disempowered. That's why recognizing, I think, triggers and states where people are feeling resistant are really critical. And then lastly, accountability, how we hold ourselves and others accountable. But I think where you're pointing to that's really important about transparency is that we have to be real with ourselves first, right? There's an important, I think, factor in being a leader, in being able to see yourself and love yourself regardless of your flaws, because we all have them, right? And also not letting that become a derailer for you, but finding a way to actually, rise above that. So I think transparency starts with ourselves. I talked earlier about the conversation is key to building relationships. Well, the first and foremost, I think, conversation is the one you have with yourself in your head, and how clear are you about that, and how it affects your behaviors. And then if we can be transparent with ourselves, I think it's a lot easier than to be straight up with other people, right? So I think it's very, very interrelated.
We do have that dialogue in our heads. And I don't know if this is accurate. I'm curious your thoughts on this. It almost seems like those internal conversations, sometimes the stress or anxiety or whatever, the emotional pieces, a part of us, when we hold all of those things in, it's almost like a balloon, that, partial blown up balloon that you're trying to hold in. Eventually something kind of leaks out here and there. And oftentimes when it leaks out, it's not in a productive way. It can show up as anger or saying something you would not normally say, or maybe criticizing someone in front of a team of people, things you wouldn't normally do. But it seems like it's a lot easier for those things to happen when we have so much else going on in the way of productive conversation with ourselves.
I think that's why it's really important to have a structure. In coaching, I think we use structures with people so that one, they recognize when they go to that place where they are feeling agitated, overwhelmed, whatever that emotion is, identify it, be able to really catch it as quickly as possible, and then use some kind of and I'm going to go back to truth, like what is the truth in this? Because so often our emotions are so hijacked and amped up that we're looking through really a false lens of the situation. So those are some of the things I think we teach leaders, is how to maneuver in times when you are going to be hijacked. And we all are. I mean, we're never going to stop that. That's just part of being human, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we can choose how we're going to respond to it.
Exactly. That's our choice, right? Whether it's ourselves or the world around us. I'm going to ask you to make some predictions, which, of course, what I like about predictions is most of them are wrong, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You can be
good.
as bold as you want. You have to be right.
Oh, I
You're
can
right.
be bold. Okay, good.
You're right. There aren't really predictions most of the time. You kind of cast forward towards the end of the year. People are going through budgeting for businesses and planning and dealing with teams and all kinds of things in the personal life. What do you think the next challenge that leaders are faced with that's sort of just maybe over that horizon or just not quite there in front of us, but we can start thinking about and preparing for?
I think it is going to be, how do we continue to develop teams without the benefit of being able to bring people together to build relationships? So how do we build relationships in this new sort of virtual reality that we're in? And so I think it's going to take some creativity and some willingness to try some new vehicles to be able to get there. But I think that's going to be the big challenge going forward.
I saw one experience actually my daughter had within her job where they had a social event and the company shipped. They're having some things to drink and some different things they were doing. But everybody got it at their house, and they all got together and had their celebration for their success of their project. And it bridged some of that gap of not being physically present, but we all have something physically we're sharing in our own way.
That's such a great idea. Yeah, I really like that a lot. I know a lot of people are doing virtual happy hours and, meetings like that with their staff, and that's pretty awesome.
But I think you're right. It's easy to get into kind of the things are working, just keep the engine running, keep moving forward, get our goals done, get our things done. And a leader's job is to constantly step back and say, okay, what do we need to work on? What do I need to work on? Where's the next place we can go as a team? Where's the next place individuals can go, and how you can help them? And it's easy to use the current pattern we're stuck in. Now we're in it, right?
Yeah, and just try to take how we used to do it and apply it to this. And that, I don't know that that's exactly the way forward. I think we have to find some new ways forward. It's a good option, but there's got to be more, I think, too.
Great. Yeah. How about some resources? We mentioned your book, and you obviously offer a number of services, both at the team and individual and leader level. What are some resources? By the way, what's your website so everybody knows what?
Oh yeah. It's Exponents is spelled with an X, XPONENTS.com, and we've actually put out a lot of resources, just even whether people join the mailing list or on social media. For example, I mean, we try to push out things that are just free resources to keep, people thinking and learning and growing. And so there's some of that available. I have the book, as I mentioned, Cycle of Transformation. I think that is helpful as well. And there's also a place on my website for other resources. So I try to list other books, authors, TED Talks, things that are, I think, helpful based on this kind of work around team, leader, coaching. So those are the topics that we really focus on.
Excellent. Well, I hope you come back and share with us more, because you're in the thick of it with everyone else, working with leaders and in your role and your capacity. And, it's not routine right now. A lot of things are changing. Lessons are being learned. So I hope you come back and share more of that with us.
Yeah, I'd love to.
That'd be great. It's interesting, this is an Analyst Corner program, but I oftentimes focus on leadership kinds of topics and try to take a break from the technology. And let's talk about other real things that are going on for IT or for product or executive leaders and just individuals. All of us are kind of dealing with and facing.
I mean, I think leadership, it's not, any industry, right? And any life, really. It's how are we operating within our own life has a lot to do with leadership. So, yeah.
Yeah, you can't separate work from personal, especially now, right?
You can't, yeah.
Well, good. Thanks. It was great. A good friend, Deb Severson, and of course, an expert at coaching and helping leaders, transparency and truth. It's a lot of good things that I think are important to work on. I appreciate the work that you do. It's good work.
Yeah, thank you, Mitch. Thanks for having me.
You bet. We'll look forward to having you on again.
All right. Bye.
Join topic experts and peers for a Splunk virtual event. Observability to enable your digital initiatives. Are your apps and services distributed in the cloud, getting refactored as microservices, or becoming more complex? If they are, you must factor in observability. Observability is all your data to help you find unexpected failure conditions, explain why they happen, and resolve them fast. This event is about the challenges, opportunities, and best practices to successfully build observability into everything you develop, deliver, or monitor. Register today.
Thanks, Mitch. That was great. Well, guys, that's going to wrap our show for today, September 7th. Again, happy birthday to my brother in New York. We won't be on tomorrow, Wednesday the 8th. We will be back Thursday the 9th with episode 88, Double Eights, the hard way. And until then, though, I hope you're all well and safe, strong, tech strong. This is Alan Schimmel. We're out.